are strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be.
If you just really want to see the graphics that are supposed to be back here as we're talking, you can pull up the live stream. Yes, ma'am, did you have a question? Okay. Chapter 7, let's look at verses 1 through 10 to begin with. Noted as trespass offering in my text. Now, this is the law of the guilt offering. It is most holy. In the place where they slay the burnt offering, they are to slay the guilt offering, and he shall sprinkle its blood around the altar. Then he shall offer from it all its fat, and the fat tail, and the fat that covers the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe on the liver, he shall remove with the kidneys. And the priest shall offer them up in smoke on the altar as an offering by fire to the Lord. It is a guilt offering. Every male among the priests may eat of it. It shall be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy. I'm going to stop just briefly, just for clarity's sake. The stuff that was put on the altar and burned was not what they ate. It was the rest of the animal that was made available to them to eat. The things that went on the altar and were burned and went up as smoke to God. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. There is one law for them. The priest who makes atonement with it shall have it. Also, the priest who presents any man's burnt offering, that priest shall have it for himself. Shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering, which he has presented. Likewise, every grain offering that is baked in the oven, and everything prepared in a pan or on a griddle, shall belong to the priest who presents it. And every grain offering mixed with oil or dry shall belong to the sons of Aaron, to all alike. All right, so the law of the guilt offering and the trespass offering is discussed here. It's declared to be an offering that is most holy. It is said to share its rule with the burnt offering. So if you want more information about the process, go back and look at the burnt offering process. And this is what this had to follow. The blood was sprinkled all around the altar. The fat portions were offered by fire to the Lord. And the priest received the remainder of it. That included the hide. Now, why is the hide important? You make clothes with it. You can make furniture with it. You can make all sorts of shoes with it. You can make all sorts of things with that leather when you tan it and make use of it. So it was a valuable thing as well. And it also kind of tells us that God didn't just waste these animals. He made sure that they were useful for food, that they were useful for other things that were needed. Listen, as many animals as were sacrificed and as much as the priests received, there wasn't a whole lot of killing of animals that needed to go on to supply the things that they needed. Scroll covers and shoes and the elements of their clothing that were leather and whatever they used this for, the food. I mean, just the meat alone was a supply for the priest and his family. So it was made useful, and I don't know that God has ever just uselessly killed. So that's worth taking note of. Some regulations for distribution that are set forth in verses 7 through 10. It's the one who offers, the priest who actually offers the sacrifice, that keeps the hide, that gets the meat. Grain offerings, whether they're baked or cooked otherwise, belong to the priest who offers them, while mixed grain offerings are shared among all Aaron's sons. So that's a little bit different. Those, in other words, go to the high priest and that family specifically. I'll be honest with you, verses 9 and 10, not real sure how they fit in here, because the trespass offering, the guilt offering, was a blood offering. This discussion about the grain offering at the end, it's not directly part of that offering as I understand it. So it really is just talking about the distribution of these things more than anything else. Then he switches to the peace offering. Now, what might be different about a peace offering? And I would suggest, by the way, that this is not an offering that is made to secure peace. That's done in the atonement offering. This is an offering that is done because of peace, because you have reconciliation. You'll notice that this is a grain offering. This is not a blood offering. So this is not about forgiveness. This is about thanksgiving. And that makes a difference. Now, this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which shall be presented to the Lord. If he offers it by way of thanksgiving, then along with the sacrifice of thanksgiving, he shall offer unleavened cakes mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of well-stirred fine flour mixed with oil. With the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving, he shall present his offering with cakes of leavened bread. Now, I saw some eyebrows go up. That is very astute, and this is where all of my afternoon has been spent. So we'll talk about it in a moment. And of this he shall present one of every offering as a contribution to the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offerings. And as for, and by the way, I may have just answered my own question. These offerings, these grain offerings, actually may be offered contemporary with the trespass offering. So you offer the trespass offering and the grain offering of peace and thanksgiving together. And the reason I say that is because of the verse I just read. As a contribution of the Lord, it shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. Well, there's no blood in a grain offering, so it's got to refer back to the offering that's already been talked about. As for the flesh of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offerings, it shall be eaten on the day of his offering. He shall not leave any of it over until morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering is a votive or free will offering, okay, what is the word votive? What does that mean? Okay, and that's exactly what votive means. The only time I have ever heard that word used is with a candle. We know what a votive candle is. They're called votive candles for a reason, because they were used when you were making vows and offering prayers. So anyway, this is where I don't really know how to explain it other than saying this, and I may not even completely grasp it fully, but this is like you say, God, I promise you that I will do this. And you've made a vow to him, and you're completing that vow. Maybe this is a sacrifice that comes at the end of the Nazirite vow, or anything like that. That would have been, you obligate yourself to God. This is offered when you've completed that as a way of offering thanks. Yes, sir, David.
Just clarification or insight. So when it states that they threw the blood of the peace offerings, I know it states specifically throwing blood for the other offerings in a specific manner. Is that referencing discarding it or throwing it in the same manner?
I think that's talking about specifically distributing the blood the way that the sacrifice requires. Whether it's put onto the horns of the altar and poured at the base of the altar, or scattered toward the tent, or scattered at the base of the altar. Sometimes it says scatter it, sometimes it says pour it. I think that is what that is talking about. The significant part about this is verse 15. This particular offering has to be eaten on the day that it's offered. So the priest gets the meat, but he's got to eat it that day. It doesn't get left over. Whatever isn't eaten has to be burned. So, however, with the votive or free will offering, something that someone is doing of their own, not something they've been asked to do, God hasn't said this offering needs to be made. I'm just making it of my own free will. It shall be eaten on the day that he offers his sacrifice, and on the next day what is left of it may be eaten. So those offerings, the priest can keep the leftovers for one more day. But what is left over from the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day shall be burned with fire. So there's a lot of very specific rules about these things. All of those rules, I'm going to tell you, I don't understand. I don't know that I have to understand them. Now, through continued study and growth and talking to people, I may come one day to go, oh, that makes perfect sense. And why I didn't understand that 10 years ago, I don't know. I was an idiot. But I'll just be honest with you. Some of this stuff, I don't understand the whys and wherefores. I just know this is what he said. Now, if this is what he said, if we respect God and we respect the purpose of the sacrifice, and that's an important distinction. Not just respect God, but also respect the sacrifice that God gave. If we do that, then we handle it exactly the way God says. And so for these sacrifices, you don't keep leftovers for a day, but for these sacrifices, I can keep leftovers for a day. Part of respecting God in the sacrifice is following those rules, whether I understand them or not. The first sacrifice that you're told specifically you can't keep the leftovers, is that meat going to somehow go bad faster than the other meat? No, it's not about that. It's about the nature of the sacrifice and what it's for. So we have to assume when God gives a command, he has a reason for the command. He tells us the reason sometimes, and he may even tell us the reason all the time, but we may not always know the reason. And how many of you were a child at one time in your life? Okay, everybody's raising their hand. How many of your parents said the same thing that my parents said? Because I said so. That is a legitimate reason. And the bottom line is, we do it because he said so. Now, if we can grow to understand it, and that has happened to a large degree in my life. When I was a child, I didn't always understand why my parent gave an instruction, but as an adult, I came to appreciate what they were doing and what they were trying to teach me and how they were trying to protect me as I matured. And by the way, I practiced some of those very same things with my kids. And I once said, I think I talked about this at my granddaughter's birthday party the other day. I once said I would never say to my children, because I said so. I would always give them an explanation. And as an adult, I had to eat those words. And in fact, there were times that the only thing that I said was because I said so. And it was the only reason I gave the command. Because what I was teaching was what? The importance of them to listen to me. So that when I'm telling them to stop, they stop what they're doing rather than continue on or stand there arguing with me about whether they need to stop. Because sometimes when you say stop, there's an immediacy issue. And if they don't stop, then they are harmed. Or even worse. And so you want them to listen first. And then if they learn later the whys, that's fine. And I think it was Angel that said that she's actually told Elowen, you do what I say and we can talk about why later. That's it. May not have been her, it may have been Victoria. There was 2 or 3 people standing around that conversation. But anyway, it may be the case that we learn through subsequent study what some of this means, and we may even learn it by the end of the book. But as it stands right now, the way I approach all of these books is I look at what has been said to me up to this point. And I don't know all of those things. I just know that there is a reason he is giving these instructions. They are very specific. They are connected to the specific offering. And therefore, there is some substantive reason pertaining to that offering that he has asked for it to be handled that way. Now, why does this matter? Well, we get to the New Testament, and someone may ask the question like, well, why do I have to be baptized? There's no magic in the water, and there's no, I don't get anything but wet and cold if it's 30 degrees that morning. There's more on that later. Why baptize? And some people ask that question and they conclude, well, there's no good reason for it, so it must not be important, so I don't have to do it. Why sing? Why can't I play too? And I can't tell you the number of times I have actually had these conversations and heard these arguments made. Look, this is a gift that God gave me, and this is what I can do. And I'm not a singer, but boy, I can play my French horn or my oboe. And if you can play an oboe good, you're one of a very few people in the world. But if you can do it good, you're special. Because it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Why can't we do it? Does it matter? When he tells us what he desires, we need to assume that there is a reason for it. If we come to realize and understand it as we mature and grow in knowledge, that's great. But until then, what do? We do what he said. Also, well, let's see. Yeah, let's go through 21. Also, the flesh that touches anything unclean shall not be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. As for other flesh, anyone who is clean may eat such flesh. But the person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which belong to the Lord, in his uncleanness, that person shall be cut off from his people. And when anyone touches anything unclean, whether human uncleanness or an unclean animal, or any unclean detestable thing, and eats of the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offering which belong to the Lord, that person shall be cut off from his people. Is it okay to be unclean and still be in fellowship with worship to God? And he's saying no. What has to happen before that person can participate again? They have to be cleansed. And that was a process for that, which isn't given to us in this context, but it is given to us in the scriptures. There was a context in which you were not qualified to participate because of your uncleanness. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. Well, let's stop. Before I get too far into this, let's go back and visit verse 13. And I tell you, I'm saying everything I know. It's not even what I know. I'm reading somebody else's words. This is a pretty good resource. It was written by a gentleman named Don D. Welt. The Bible Study Textbook Series, the original Bible Study Textbook Series. They've updated them. I don't like the updates. Took me a long time to get these books. I now actually have like 2 complete sets, but that's only happened in the last couple of years. Took me a long time to get these books. I'm going to read what he says about the leavened bread thing, because it's as good of reasoning on the topic as I've come across. Here is a remarkable reference to leavened bread being offered. Only in a peace offering could this be possible. Having made peace through the burnt offering, the worshiper is expressing his deep appreciation. At the same time, he needs to be reminded that whereas he was perfectly forgiven, he had not perfected holiness, i.e., he had not escaped all sin simply because he stood before God just as if he had never sinned. Now, he put that in quotes. I don't know where he borrowed that phrase from, but anyway. Perhaps this leavened loaf was intended to remind the worshiper that he was yet compassed about with many infirmities and was only accepted because of his sacrifice and not because of his goodness. As to the action of heaving and waving, we'll get to that in a second. One cake was held in the hand of the priest and elevated above his head as he stood before the altar of burnt offering. As he did this, he moved or waved it towards the 4 corners of the compass. Of course, this is done with the leavened cakes before the whole assembly. It is actually a method of asking God to accept our leavened lives because of the sacrifice he has provided. This becomes a dramatic way of expressing thankfulness. Leaven generally is presented in the Bible as being a bad thing. A little leaven leavens a whole lump. Leaven is characterized and connected to sin very often. The suggestion is that he allowed it in this case so that we realize that we were leavened. Despite the fact that we were forgiven, it wasn't by our merits. It wasn't because we had never sinned that we had fellowship with God. I don't know that I agree with him. I just know that that's as good of a reasoning as I've read and heard. And otherwise, I don't have the answer. But this is, to my knowledge, the only place where leavened bread was accepted as any type of sacrifice. And it appears that the unleavened bread is what was put on the altar and burned, and the leavened bread is what was given to the people to eat. And we'll talk about that a little bit maybe as we go on. So that's all I know about that. Don't ask me too many questions, because the answer will be, I don't know. All right. 22. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall not eat any fat from an ox, a sheep, or a goat. Also the fat of an animal which dies, and the fat of an animal torn by beast may be put to any other use, but you must certainly not eat it. For whoever eats the fat of the animal from which an offering by fire is offered to the Lord, even the person who eats shall be cut off from his people. Now, there's a reason for that. That reason is fairly obvious, I believe. The fat portions were that which was reserved to put on the altar and be offered to God. They belong to God. They belong to God. They're not mine. And this is part of understanding the role. They taught us this when we were coming up as kids too. When there was a bunch of people at the house, there was an order in which you were fed. When I came up, the kids did not go first. I realize that today a lot of times they are fed first. That was not what happened. The guest got served first, particularly a guest of honor. They went first. Then the adults went, usually in order of age. And the kids went last. There was a reason for that. To teach respect. And to recognize that some people belong to things and other people don't. It's not mine. It's somebody else's. Or it's right for me to allow them the right to choose. Kids almost always ate drumsticks because that's all that was left over. The good pieces were already gone. That's the thighs, by the way. The thighs are the good pieces. The fat belonged to God. It was not yours to eat. And you are not to eat any blood. The same reasoning here. You shall not eat any blood, either of bird or animal or any of your dwellings. Any person who eats any blood, even that person shall be cut off from his people. Life belongs to God. It does not belong to us. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, he who offers the sacrifice of his peace offering to the Lord shall bring his offering to the Lord from the sacrifice of his peace offerings. His own hands are to bring offerings by fire to the Lord. He shall bring the fat with the breast, that the breast may be presented as a wave offering before the Lord. And the priest shall offer up the fat in smoke on the altar, but the breast shall belong to Aaron and his sons. The fat belonged to God. The portion of meat belonged to man. You shall give the right thigh to the priest as a contribution from the sacrifices of your peace offerings. See, that's the other thing. There's little things that you got to pick up like this. You start piecing all this stuff together, and you realize that the people who served in this capacity as priests, they got well rewarded for their work. They were not given a portion of the land, you'll recall, but they did have cities. And around those cities was land that was theirs to use to grow things. And so when they weren't working in the temple, they were doing like everyone else, running their households and raising crops and doing the things that they do. But while they were working at the temple, God saw fit to provide for them clothing and monetary payment for their work, and we find out they got the hides of certain animals. They got meat from the sacrifices that they were participating in. This is what they used to feed themselves and their families. And this was in addition to the crops that came in and to the flocks that they raised and to the other things that they were doing. But while they were at the temple serving, this is how they were compensated for their work. They did well, actually. The tithe that went into the temple, there was a tithe of that went to God, and they lived off of that money. I've taken, this verse 34, I've taken the breast for the wave offering and the thigh of the contribution for the sons of Israel from the sacrifices of their peace offerings, and have given them to Aaron the priest and to his sons as their due forever from the sons of Israel. This is that which is consecrated to Aaron, and that which is consecrated to his sons from the offerings by fire to the Lord in the day when he presented them to serve as priests to the Lord. These the Lord had commanded to be given them from the sons of Israel in the day that he anointed them. It is their due forever throughout their generations. This is the law of the burnt offering and the grain offering and the sin offering and the guilt offering and the ordination offering. The ordination offering was a offering that was made when the priest was ordained. And the sacrifice of peace offerings, which the Lord commanded Moses out at Mount Sinai in the day that he commanded the sons of Israel to present their offerings to the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai. Now, verses 37 and 38, I think, are important because they actually dispel a commonly misunderstood thing. If you ask the average person what God gave Moses on Mount Sinai, they're going to say the Ten Commandments. That was a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what God taught Moses for those 40 days. All of this information about all of these sacrifices and the tabernacle, everything we read about in Exodus about the tabernacle and building the tabernacle and how to build it, and all of these sacrifices and how they're to be offered, and who's to offer them, what to do with everything, and how's it to be parsed out, and all of that instruction came to Moses on Mount Sinai. And he got one shot. He then went down the mountain, and the test was, you teach it to the people. And so it was a arduous task. Now, I do believe that God was with him. I do believe that he was a prophet. Certainly, as he wrote these books, this was not coming from him, it was coming from God. So it didn't rely upon his memory. I saw a video today where someone was raising the question about the New Testament apostles and how we can trust the Bible, how Christians can trust the Bible, because these were accounts of someone who were recounting things that were said decades earlier. How could they possibly remember what was said? Well, because it's not based upon their memory, but men were moved by the Spirit of God to write these things. These things are from God. So I believe that that's the case, but at the same time, Moses is dealing with all of these instructions on Mount Sinai. And then he comes down. And by the way, that also gives us a little bit of insight to something we've already studied. When he comes down off the mountain after those 40 days, what's going on and what's his reaction? They're worshiping a calf, and he says, "Oh, cool, can I join in?" No. He actually throws the tablets of the commandments on the ground and he begins to just rave. Yeah, he makes them burn the calf until it turns into ashes, puts the ashes in water, and makes them drink the ashes of the idol. He was you want to know why he's so angry? Because he had just been taught all of these things about God and purity and doing what's right, and that's what he came down to. And it was infuriating. And this tells me that understanding this stuff and coming to grips with these things goes a long way in helping us respect the purity and the righteousness of God and our relationship to God, and how important it is for us to respond to him properly. If I want to understand how important it is for me to respond to him properly, I need to study these things that Moses was taught, because that's clearly the effect it had on him. All right. I'm assuming that we're about out of time. The clock is wrong. So I just remembered that. And anybody have any questions before we stop? If the Lord wills, let's see, where am I at? Did I finish the chapter? Yeah, I did. I finished the chapter. Yay me. Chapter 8 next week.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my